They were so kind-hearted, so caring.
We are devastated. We are devastated.
Look at them. How precious were they were for me.
We continue to hear stories tonight of the victims of Ukrainian Airlines Flight 752. We are learning dozens of those killed had ties to the GTA, and their family and friends continue to feel their loss. Good evening, I'm Marivel Tarouk. We're going to get back to local reaction in a moment, but first, an admission of guilt from the Iranian government that the ill-fated airliner was shot down by a missile fired by the country's Revolutionary Guard. Iran's leaders insist it was unintentional. 57 Canadians were among the 176 people on board. All of them were killed. Stephen D'Souza has more on the reaction inside Iran.
I really wish I could die. Those are the words of Amir Ali Hajizadeh, a senior commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. He admitted today that Iran's military mistakenly shot down Ukraine Flight 752. Showing the chain of events on a map, he blamed the U.S. for putting the country on edge, saying they were prepared for an all-out war. He claims an operator mistook the plane for a cruise missile, heading for a sensitive site. Attempts to contact superiors failed, and within 10 seconds, the plane was shot down. Experts say Iran had to admit its role.
The evidence was just too overwhelming, and the pressure from the Canadians and the Ukrainians, I think, was such that the Iranians really had no choice but to come clean with the answers.
But those answers come saddled with more questions. Why wasn't the airspace shut down? Why weren't civilian and military officials communicating? And why did officials deny this for days? In a statement, Iran's supreme leader offered deepest sympathies and sincerest condolences and promised to dig deeper. But that offered no comfort to Iranians still in shock. What started as a vigil for the victims boiled over into anger, with chants denouncing the regime. Our children were killed. We're here because of the failures of Iran's leaders, this woman says. Cries of shame echoed outside a university. Social media showed police cracking down with tear gas, scenes similar to the protests over the economy, protests that Iran brutally cracked down on late last year.
There is sufficient anger, cumulatively, of course, not just by the admission of this plane being shot down, but also the economic troubles, the mismanagement, the autocracy of the regime.
Experts say today's admission may simply be an attempt to blunt any further investigations. Meanwhile, there are calls for nationwide protests in Iran on Sunday, as anger and frustration continues to build. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Justin Trudeau spoke today with Iran's president after the admission of guilt. The prime minister calling on Iran to take full responsibility and allow for an international investigation.
Families are seeking justice and accountability, and they deserve closure.
Trudeau said Iran's admission is only the first step in providing answers for victims' families. 3 members of Canada's rapid deployment team are now in Iran to provide support to Canadians whose relatives were killed. Trudeau said he expects more visas for Canadian officials to be granted by Iran in the coming days. Most of the people who died in the plane crash near Tehran on Wednesday were headed to Canada. They lived in communities across the country and are now being remembered in dozens of memorials. Lorenda Redekop has more on that.
In Halifax, hundreds gathered to remember 5 people who lost their lives.
Our hearts are broken.
One of the victims, engineering student Masime Gavi. She was bringing her younger sister to Canada, just accepted at Dalhousie University.
She was so excited to get her little sister to join her in Canada, to start a new life, to start a new journey.
Their parents watched the live stream of this memorial from their home in Iran.
It was not flight of death. It was flight of hopes. It was flight of beautiful smiles. It was flight of beautiful minds. It was flight of innocent souls.
In Vancouver, people remembered husband and wife Daniel Saket and Faye Kazarani. He had been living in Montreal, but decided to move west after visiting for just 3 days.
They were just a match, and Faye and Daniel were those two people that there were two bodies in one spirit.
People gathered in cities across the country, including ones where no victims lived, but people are still feeling the loss.
Amazing numbers of messages and text and offers of support. It's not something that I necessarily expected to see in Nunavut, where there's only a few of us.
One counselor has this suggestion for how to support those in the Iranian community who've lost friends or family.
We have this thing called Persian Taarruf, where you almost have to ask a person a number of times before they will accept help. So perhaps if you want to help somebody, is do things for them without asking.
She says as people grieve, they also want answers about how and why this happened, an important step to beginning the healing. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
The heartbreaking stories of those lost in the crash who called the GTA home continue to come to light. Shaheen Moghadam lost his wife Shakiba and son Rustin. The two left for Iran a day after Rustin's 10th birthday. They were visiting family 7 years after starting a new life here in Canada. And now Shaheen remembers them.
She's so amazing. She was an angel. She gave such a great love to people. My son was a great swimmer, speak 4 languages, smart boy. Never could sit, always jumping, running, laughing. Let me and my wife always laugh, always smile, always supportive for me and for everyone. I lost almost all my life. No more future, no more standing. I don't know how to stand again. She was my support for all the aspects, everything in work, in life. And I thanks to Mr. Trudeau to visit me this afternoon personally. He just cried with me for 1 hour. Such a great honor. It's gonna be Shakiba and Rustin gonna be proud of that. I don't want no one has such a disaster happened to no one.
We have more stories of unimaginable heartbreak that's coming up, but our online team as well has been working to make sure the stories of all the victims are told. You can read more about them on our website, cbc.ca/Toronto. To other news now. A man in his 20s is dead after a shooting at a Scarborough townhouse early this morning.
We don't know how many there was, and we don't have a description at this time, but there was 1 or more shooters, and they were outside the residence.
Police were called to a home near Nielsen and Ellesmere Roads at about 2 a.m. They say the suspects shot multiple times in the back door of the unit. Officers found a man suffering from gunshot wounds to his torso. He was rushed to hospital where he later died. Police are asking residents in the area to review any surveillance footage they may have. They don't yet have any information on suspects. Well, a flood warning is in effect for Toronto and the region, with all of southwestern Ontario bracing for heavy rainfall. For the city, between 40 and 60 millimeters of rain could fall by this evening. More than 70 millimeters is expected in other areas. Already, the pooling has caused some road closures, with more expected on the way. So let's bring in Sonia Sash from the Weather Network to get a better sense of how this weekend is unfolding with all of the rainfall. Sonia.
Hi there. Thank you so much. Well, the freezing rain is ramping up. Yes, right now, as you mentioned, it is raining and is 3 degrees, feeling like -2. We do have some weather advisories in effect, freezing rain warning as well as the rainfall warning that spans all the way through Windsor through to Toronto. Already at Pearson Airport, we have seen over 45 millimeters of rain falling. And again, that's going to continue. Along the DVP, there are some flood warnings as well, high alarm warnings. So the Toronto Police are on that, watching that very closely. This is why we have a system that came from Texas, bringing in a lot of that moisture, and it is moving its way through east. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of that rainfall, wind gusts. So downtown Toronto could see over 50-kilometer-per-hour winds. We will definitely see some of that freezing rain. Peterborough, GTA, if you are north of the 401, please be careful tonight going into tomorrow. That freezing rain does expand going into the overnight and tomorrow. Toronto, you could see maybe that rain or mixing tonight going into tomorrow as well. So if you don't need to be traveling, it's probably a great idea not to be. Also, don't use your bath, your shower. Again, that sewage system will be strained, and we're keeping an eye on that. We have more coming up later in the program for you. So again, stay off the roads if you can tonight.
Sage advice, Sonia. Thank you, and we'll see you in a little bit. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Well, the weather isn't just causing a big mess, but again, closures along some roads. Kelda Yoon is on Lakeshore Boulevard for us tonight with the latest on these closures. Kelda.
Hi, Maribel. That's right. I'm on Lakeshore at Parliament. You can see behind me here, this is just one example, ponding along a small stretch of the Lakeshore at Parliament has closed off a portion of the road, and this is happening in other areas as well. Now, most of the flooding that we are seeing is happening north of here in the Peel region, in York region, where numerous roads have been closed since this afternoon. Also, about an hour and a half ago, Bayview Avenue, just south of Pottery Road, along the lower Don River, a large stretch of that is also closed due to flooding, with drivers being diverted. Now, the city is suggesting that motorists as well as cyclists, if you happen to be out, try to avoid traveling in low-lying areas like the Lakeshore, like the Bayview Extension. The Toronto and Region Conservation Authority says this weather we are seeing is unseasonable, and that this much rain during wintertime tends to cause a lot more problems than in the summertime. And that's because the ground, frozen ground, is less able to absorb the water to catch the rain, and as well, less leaves on the trees is able to catch the water. The Conservation Authority says its main message, as always, is to stay safe. If you do see ponding on the roads, turn around, find another route, because you don't know how deep that water can be. And as always, stay away from riverbanks and shorelines.
We're also expecting high winds along the lakeshore, and that can bring with it the potential for waves in the 2-meter range offshore on Lake Ontario. And the issue with that is a threat for erosion. So when we talk about shorelines being dangerous, we are referring to shorelines not just along rivers and streams, but along Lake Ontario as well.
Now, flooding in homes, of course, also a risk, a problem. Now, city crews, they have been out and they have been making sure that all the catch basins, there's no debris on those catch basins so that they're able to catch the water. Of course, residents can also do their part. I spoke to a plumber earlier about some preventative measures that homeowners can take. He says that it's best to work outside and make your way in.
You want to make sure your downspouts are clear of debris. If there's any snow or ice buildup, make sure that's all pushed out of the way so the water can get away from the house. Second, I tell them to look at any outside drains that they have, make sure those are clear. From there, we move inside and we look. Here we have the backwater valve. So if you've had one of these installed, what that is it's a one-way valve on the drain that allows the water to go outside of the house from your waste, but if water tries to come back in the house from the city, the flapper comes up and it stops the water coming in. And lastly, make sure you check your sump pumps, make sure they're functioning properly. It's always a good idea to have a battery backup.
Now, although the rain has been falling, Burke says it's not too late to implement these measures. If you haven't done so, do it now, because once your basement is flooded, there is nothing that can be done. Send it back to you, Maribel.
All right, thank you for that, Kelda.
My mother was a special lady. not just for her kids and her family, but to all of us here today.
Hundreds gathered to lay Diane Ford to rest. We will take you to the service next. We want to take you back to our top story tonight. Loved ones remembering their family and friends killed in Ukrainian Airlines Flight 752. Tonight, we also share with you the story of a husband, his pregnant wife, and their 3-year-old son. Now, their friends are not only mourning their loss, but are left with their belongings and unsure what to do next. Angelina King has their story.
Their kids were supposed to grow up together and become like family, just as they did. After Farida Golami had her son Jiwan, she told her friend it was time she had a baby too, so she did.
I brought a friend for Jiwan, but Jiwan never come back. And my daughter always keeps saying Jiwan. Keep saying she wants her friend. I know she can't talk, but she knows that something's happened.
Golami's husband Razgar Rahimi and their son were on the plane. His stuffed animal was found at the crash site, along with a souvenir for their friends.
And this is a gift for my daughter.
Jiwan was 3 years old and was already learning to speak 4 languages. Rahimi had a doctorate in electrical and computer engineering.
He was really easygoing. Sometimes I was saying, you know what, this is not working, this is hard, you know. He was always telling me, be positive, it's gonna be okay.
Golami had a degree in industrial design with dreams of one day opening her own business.
She designed many things, such as the necklace that I have and the earrings she made for me.
She was 7 months pregnant. They were ready to welcome another baby boy in March.
They painted everything very beautifully. They had the curb ready.
I didn't know when we had that tea that she would become such a huge part of our family.
The family made friends easily. Some gathered today sharing their memories.
They were so kind-hearted. I remember they just came to Canada after 2 months. They made such good friends. I will always ask her, how do you make like this a strong relationship?
That's Razgar's part.
He was supposed to pick them up from the airport in their car. Now he doesn't know what to do with their belongings. He says the family in Iran isn't ready to deal with the logistics. Friends ask the mayor. He's helping coordinate.
Really, this is unknown territory. They have no next of kin here. And so the neighbors, the friends, and even the landlords don't know what to do.
In the meantime, their friends are still coming together with such a tragedy, but one that's brought them all together.
They were very supportive to us. They were there. You know, we had like the confidence that, okay, we're not alone at all. We have a family.
A book of condolences will be set up here at the town hall, which will then be sent back to their family in Iran. There's also a candlelight vigil scheduled for Monday night to remember a family that became like a family to so many. Angelina King, CBC News, Stouffville.
And Diane Ford, the matriarch of a family that continues to make its political mark on the city and the province, was laid to rest today. Hundreds gathered to honor her at a public funeral in Etobicoke this morning.
She guided us through the good times and through the tough times. And until her last day, our family never made any major decision without her.
But she was a mom, and she loved her children and her grandchildren and her family, and I think it is true that she's the glue that kept that family together.
The service was held at the Toronto Congress Centre. Diane Ford was the mother of Ontario Premier Doug Ford and his brother, former Toronto Mayor, the late Rob Ford. She died of cancer in her home on Sunday at the age of 85. To China now, where they've recorded the first death in the outbreak of an apparently new viral respiratory infection. The disease erupted in the city of Wuhan. The victim died of pneumonia. Several others are in critical condition. Chinese New Year is approaching with millions set to travel across the country. No new cases have been recorded, though, in the last week. Emergency crews in Australia are hoping to gain ground against raging wildfires with a week of cooler weather expected. But the news comes in the middle of big challenges. Today, 149 fires were burning, 59 not contained, and authorities warn the hot weather will return. The fires have already burned an estimated 10.3 million hectares. Smoke has drifted as far as South America. Back here at home, you are looking live at Lakeshore near the DVP tonight. We are tracking a flood warning that's impacting the GTA and beyond. We'll bring you the details on the rainfall and freezing rain coming up in weather. Stay with us. Sonia's back with the forecast. I mean, the rain fell all day today, Sonia, but still a lot to look out for this weekend.
Absolutely. Huge amounts of rain are on the way, but freezing rain is falling south. But in saying that, we do have some freezing rain warnings in effect, as well as rainfall warnings in effect. Currently, Pearson Airport has seen over 45 millimeters of that rain, more to come. And saying that, flood warnings, especially along the DVP. The Toronto Police are keeping their eye on that. They may have to shut down some of the DVP. So again, stay tuned to the Weather Network as well. But let's take a look. Let's break it all down. This low pressure system is making its way through, wreaking havoc. It came from Texas, bringing a lot of that moisture to us in southern Ontario. As that low makes its way through, Niagara could see over 80-kilometer-per-hour winds. Toronto could see over 50-kilometer-per-hour winds. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The temperature drops. So we were at 11.9. We broke records from 1975. And then it actually dropped very, very quickly, 4 degrees in literally 10 minutes. And it's going to continue to dive down. In saying that, that freezing rain will reach the GTA. If you are just south of the 401, you could see that going into tonight and into tomorrow, and then more to the north could see that snow. Now, as the system makes its way through, we are not out of the woods. Toronto, you could see some of that mixing or snow come tomorrow morning. But in saying that, your drive, Highway 7, 400, 404, really could see a lot of that freezing rain tonight and into tomorrow. So if you are driving, please drive slowly. If you don't need to be on the roads, probably a good idea not to be. Again, this is the rainfall accumulation. An additional 50 millimeters of rain could fall. So that's in addition to the 60 that certain areas have already seen. We could see a total of 90. But again, tonight, 3 degrees, feeling like 1, and then -2 going into tonight. So be safe out there if you're driving.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Sonia.
Thank you.
And that is our show for you tonight. We will be keeping an eye on the weather for you and all of the latest news. Of course, you can stay caught up anytime on our website, cbcnews.com.